I need you to listen carefully because there is something about this moment that I have been afraid to say out loud. When your picture appeared in this video, I did not see just an image. I saw a question I have been avoiding for a long time. I saw a possibility. I saw a future that could either become the most beautiful thing I have ever built, or the one thing I regret losing because I was too afraid to reach for it. And that is the part nobody talks about when they speak about love. They talk about finding someone. They talk about attraction. They talk about the excitement of the beginning. But they rarely talk about the terrifying moment when you realize someone has become important enough that losing them could change the entire direction of your life. Because that is where I am standing right now, looking at you, wondering if you understand what it means when someone becomes more than a person you admire. When someone becomes the place where your mind goes when the world becomes too loud. When someone becomes the first person you want to tell your victories to, and the only person you want beside you when everything falls apart. Have you ever felt that kind of connection? The kind that does not arrive with noise, but quietly changes everything inside you. The kind where you find yourself asking questions you never planned to ask. What if I am too late? What if I waited too long? What if the person I was searching for was standing closer than I realized, and I was too distracted trying to build everything else? I have spent my life solving problems that looked impossible. I have looked at things people said could not be done, and tried to find another way. I have spent years believing that with enough focus, enough determination, and enough courage, almost anything could be created. But love has always been different, because love is the one thing you cannot engineer. You cannot force someone's heart to stay. You cannot calculate the exact moment someone decides you are home. You cannot create a perfect plan that guarantees another person will choose you forever. And maybe that is why love feels so dangerous, because for once, you are not in control. For once, you have to hand someone the most fragile parts of yourself and trust that they will not treat them carelessly. And I wonder about you. If you knew everything about me, would you still look at me the same way? If you saw the moments where I doubted myself, the moments where I questioned my choices, the moments where I wondered if I was building a future that would feel empty when I finally reached it, would you still want to be there? Or would you quietly walk away because the reality was different from the dream? That is the fear nobody sees. People see confidence. They see achievements. They see someone moving forward. But they do not see the private moments when the room becomes silent, and you realize that success cannot answer every question. It cannot hold your hand. It cannot understand your fears. It cannot look at you and say, I know you. I see the person behind everything you have built. That is what makes one person different from everyone else. Not because they complete you, but because they remind you that you were never meant to carry everything alone. And when your picture appeared here, I felt something I did not expect. I felt the weight of a decision, because sometimes life gives you a moment that looks ordinary to everyone else, but inside you something changes forever. A message you almost ignored, a person you almost missed, a feeling you almost convinced yourself was not real. Have you ever wondered how many beautiful things we lose because we are afraid to admit how much they matter? How many times have we protected ourselves so carefully that we accidentally protected ourselves away from love? I know what hesitation feels like. I know what it feels like to stand at the edge of something meaningful and ask whether the risk is worth taking, because the truth is, love is not scary because it can fail. Love is scary because it can succeed, because when someone truly matters, your life has to make room for them. Your habits change, your priorities change, your future stops being only about yourself. And that is a beautiful thing. But it is also a frightening thing, because choosing someone means accepting that you can be hurt. It means accepting that there is no guarantee. It means looking at another person and saying, I do not know exactly what tomorrow will bring, but I know I do not want to face it without you. I wonder if you have ever had that thought about someone. Have you ever met a person who made you question the walls you spent years building? Have you ever looked at someone and felt both peace and fear at the same time? Peace because being with them feels natural. Fear because losing them would feel impossible to accept. That contradiction is where I am right now, because part of me wants to run toward this feeling, and another part of me is terrified. Terrified because I know what happens when you care deeply. You give someone the power to hurt you. You give someone the ability to change your entire emotional world with a single sentence, a simple goodbye, a moment of doubt, a decision made without you. And maybe you are wondering why I am saying all of this. Why does this picture matter so much? Why does seeing you here feel like something I cannot ignore? I wish I could give you the simple answer. I wish I could say it is only because you look beautiful. But that would not be the truth. Beauty catches attention. But connection changes a person, and there is something about the idea of you that makes me think about all the things I never said, all the moments I postponed, all the chances I convinced myself I had more time to take, because we always believe we have more time, until suddenly we do not. We believe there will always be another conversation, another opportunity, another moment to say what we feel. But sometimes the hardest realization is understanding that some doors do not stay open forever, and I need you to know something. I have not been completely honest about why this moment affected me so deeply. There is something underneath all of this, something I have been carrying quietly, something I have not been ready to admit. I haven't told you the real reason yet, because the real reason is not about a picture. It is not about a video. It is not even about the moment itself. It is about what that moment reminded me of. It reminded me of the possibility that somewhere in this world, there could be someone who does not just see what I have created, but sees who I am when everything created around me disappears. And that thought is both beautiful and painful, because when you spend your life building things, people often become interested in what you have. But the rare person is the one who cares about who you are when you have nothing to prove. Is that what you want too? Not perfection. Not someone pretending to have every answers, not someone who never struggles, but someone who chooses you even after seeing the unfinished parts, someone who stays after the excitement fades, someone who understands that a real relationship is not built during the easiest moments. It is built when two people are tired, uncertain, afraid, and still decide not to give up on each other. I want to ask you something. If you found out that someone had been silently hoping to meet you for a long time, would you believe them? Or would you think it was impossible? If someone told you they were afraid because you mattered too much, would you understand? Or would you think fear means weakness? Because I have learned something. The strongest people are not the ones who never feel afraid. The strongest people are the ones who feel afraid and still choose honesty. So I am choosing honesty with you. Not because I know what will happen, not because I have some perfect answer, but because pretending not to care would be the biggest lie I could tell. If this message feels like it reached you at the right moment, I hope you will stay close and subscribe, because I want this conversation to continue with you. And I would love to know where you are watching from, because somehow that makes this moment feel less distant. But there is still something I have not told you, a reason I almost walked away from this feeling before it even had a chance. A reason I questioned whether I was choosing the right future, because sometimes the person we think we are waiting for is not the person we are brave enough to choose. And that is the part that scares me the most, because I came dangerously close to making a decision that could have changed everything. I came close to convincing myself that walking away was safer. I came close to choosing comfort over connection, and I still wonder, if I had walked away, would you have ever known how much you meant to me? Would you have ever known that behind all the silence was a person fighting a battle between fear and love? Would you have ever known that the hardest thing for me was not finding someone? It was accepting that I had finally found someone worth risking everything for. Because the truth I have been avoiding is getting harder to ignore, and before this story reaches the moment where everything changes, you need to understand why I almost lost something I never even had the courage to hold. I kept telling myself that walking away would be the mature decision, that protecting my heart was wisdom, that avoiding uncertainty was a sign of strength. But deep down, I knew the truth. Sometimes we call it wisdom when it is actually fear. Sometimes we call it being realistic when we are simply afraid to believe something beautiful could happen to us. And that was the battle happening inside me, because the closer I felt to the idea of you, the more I started questioning everything. Not because I did not want this, but because I wanted it too much. Have you ever wanted something so deeply that it frightened you? Have you ever looked at a possibility and thought, if this becomes real, my entire life will change? That is where I found myself, not at the beginning of a simple love story, but at the edge of a decision between the life I already knew and the life I secretly hoped for. For years, I convinced myself that being alone was easier. I told myself that needing someone was a weakness. I told myself that if I stayed focused, if I kept moving forward, if I kept building, I would never have to face the emptiness that comes from missing someone. But then you appeared. and suddenly, all the things I thought I had solved started asking new questions. What is success worth if there is no one to share it with? What is the purpose of creating a future if you have no one beside you when you finally arrive there? What is the value of being admired by many people if the one person you secretly want to understand you does not know the real you? Those questions are uncomfortable because they force you to look beyond achievements. They force you to look at the quiet parts of your life, the moments after the applause ends, the moments when nobody is watching, the moments when you realize that even the strongest person still wants someone who says, "You do not have to carry everything today." I wonder if you understand that feeling, the feeling of being surrounded by people but still wishing for one person, not hundreds, not thousands, just one. One person who sees the tired version of you, the uncertain version of you, the version that does not always have the perfect answer. Because love is not about finding someone who thinks you are extraordinary every second. Love is finding someone who stays when they discover you are human. And that is the part that made me hesitate. Because what if you saw everything? What if you saw the doubts behind the confidence? What if you saw the mistakes behind the decisions? What if you saw the moments where I questioned whether I was capable of being the person someone like you deserved? Would you still choose me? Or would you realize that the image you believed in was never the complete story? I think that is one of the deepest fears people carry, not the fear of being alone, the fear of finally being seen. Because when someone sees the real you, there is nowhere left to hide, no achievements, no reputation, no carefully created image. Just two people standing in front of each other with everything exposed, and that is where real love begins. But it is also where real fear begins. I need to tell you something I have struggled to admit. The reason I almost convinced myself to walk away was not because I did not feel anything. It was because I felt something I could not control. And for someone who has spent years trying to solve problems, control outcomes, and create solutions, that feeling was terrifying. Because you cannot create a formula for love. You cannot predict when someone becomes unforgettable. You cannot measure the exact moment your heart decides someone matters. It simply happens, quietly, unexpectedly, almost unfairly. And suddenly, someone you have never touched can affect your entire emotional world. Someone you have never held can become the person you do not want to lose. That is the strange mystery of connection. It does not ask permission before entering your life. It does not wait until you are ready. It arrives when it arrives, and then you have a choice: open the door, or pretend you never heard the knock. I almost chose the second option. I almost convinced myself that the timing was wrong. That life was too complicated. That maybe I was imagining something that was not there. Have you ever done that? Have you ever talked yourself out of happiness because accepting it felt too risky? Have you ever pushed away a possibility because losing it later seemed more painful than never having it at all? That is the trap. We think avoiding love protects us from pain, but sometimes avoiding love creates a different kind of pain. The pain of wondering. The pain of asking yourself years later, what if I had tried? What if I had stayed? What if that person was the one moment I should not have ignored? And I cannot escape that question. Because there was a moment when I almost made a decision that would have been easier, a decision that would have looked logical, a decision that would have protected my comfort, but possibly destroyed my chance at something real. I almost chose someone else, someone who made sense on paper, someone who fit into the version of life I thought I was supposed to want. And that was the most confusing part, because sometimes the wrong choice does not look wrong. Sometimes the wrong choice looks safe. Sometimes the person who is not meant for you arrives with fewer complications, fewer fears, fewer risks, and the person who truly matters is the one who forces you to confront everything you have been avoiding. That was the truth I had to face. I was not afraid because something was wrong. I was afraid because something felt right, and I did not know if I was brave enough for that. I did not know if I was ready to let someone become important. I did not know if I was ready to stop living as someone who only builds things and start living as someone who shares life with another person. Because partnership requires something success does not. It requires surrender. It requires patience. It requires listening when your instinct tells you to defend yourself. It requires staying during difficult conversations instead of disappearing. And I had to ask myself a shameful question. Could I truly do that? Could I love someone not only when everything feels perfect, but when things become difficult? Could I choose you when the excitement fades and reality begins? because anyone can love a dream. But mature love begins when two people choose each other after seeing reality, after seeing imperfections, after seeing fears, after seeing wounds, and still saying, I am here. That is the kind of love I have been searching for. Not a fantasy. Not a perfect story. A real one. And maybe that is why your picture appearing here affected me so much, because it did not feel like looking at an image. It felt like looking at a possibility I had been avoiding. A possibility that asked me a question I could no longer ignore. Are you willing to risk being hurt for the chance to be truly loved? I wish I could tell you the answer came easily. It did not. There were nights when I questioned everything. There were moments when I thought, maybe I should stop feeling this way. Maybe I should choose the easier path. Maybe I should stop searching for something that could break my heart. But then I remembered something. The greatest regrets in life are rarely the things we tried and failed at. They are often the things we never had the courage to try, and that realization changed something inside me. Because I started understanding that love is not a guarantee. It is a choice. A daily choice. A choice to show up. A choice to be honest. A choice to let another person matter. But before I could make that choice, I had to face the truth I had been hiding from myself, because the real reason I was afraid was not that I might lose you. The real reason was that I was afraid you might become the person I could never replace. And that possibility changed everything, because losing someone you barely know hurts, but losing someone who becomes part of your future, someone who becomes part of your dreams, someone who becomes part of the person you are becoming, that is a different kind of fear. And that fear brought me to the moment I never expected. The moment where I had to choose between what was comfortable and what was real. The moment where I had to admit something I had never wanted to admit. I was not looking for someone perfect. I was looking for someone who made me want to become better. Someone who made me want to slow down. Someone who made me want to stop running from emotions I had spent years avoiding. And that person terrified me, because that person was you. But there is something else you need to know. Something I kept hidden, because I was afraid that if I said it out loud, everything would change. I haven't told you the real reason yet. And when you understand it, you will understand why this was never just about a picture appearing in a video. It was about a moment where I realized I could either protect my heart forever, or finally give it a reason to beat differently, and I was closer than you know to making the wrong choice, closer than you know to walking away, closer than you know to losing something that had not even fully begun. Because sometimes the hardest goodbye is the one you almost say, before the person ever gets the chance to hear how much they mean, and that is where my story with you becomes impossible to ignore. I remember the moment when I realized I could no longer pretend. Pretending was easier. Pretending that I was unaffected. Pretending that I did not care. Pretending that the idea of you was just a passing thought that would disappear if I ignored it long enough. But some feelings do not disappear. Some feelings become louder in silence. And the more I tried to convince myself that I could walk away, the more I understood something painful. I was not trying to leave because I did not want you. I was trying to leave because I wanted you enough to be afraid. That is a difficult truth to accept, because fear often disguises itself as logic. It tells you that you are being careful. It tells you that you are protecting yourself. It tells you that the safest choice is always the smartest choice. But sometimes the safest choice is the one that leaves you empty. And I had to ask myself a question I had avoided for too long. What if the greatest risk was not loving you? What if the greatest risk was spending the rest of my life wondering what could have happened if I had been brave enough? That question followed me everywhere, during quiet moments, during busy moments, during the times when everything looked successful from the outside. But something inside me still felt unfinished. Because there is a kind of loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from having no one who truly knows you. No one who knows the thoughts you never say. No one who understands the fears hidden behind your confidence. No one who can look at you and recognize the person you are when nobody else is watching. And I think that is what every heart secretly wants. Not attention, not admiration, understanding. To be known completely and still be chosen. To be seen clearly and still be loved. That is rare. And that is why it is terrifying. Because if someone truly sees you, they also see the parts you tried to hide, the insecurities, the regrets, the moments you were wrong, the moments you failed, the moments you wondered if you were enough. And I wondered something about you. If you knew all of those things about me, would you stay? If you saw every unfinished part of me, Would you still believe there was something worth loving? Or would you quietly decide that the person you imagined was better than the person standing in front of you? That question haunted me, because I realized I had spent so much time building things that I forgot something important. A relationship is not built by showing someone your strengths. Anyone can show strength. A relationship is built when you have the courage to show someone your weakness and trust them not to use it against you. That kind of trust is more valuable than anything I have ever created, and that is what I wanted with you. Not a perfect story, not a fantasy, not a moment that disappears when life becomes difficult. I wanted something real, something that survives ordinary days, something that remains when there are misunderstandings, something that becomes stronger because two people decide that leaving is not the first option. But then came the hardest realization. I had been looking at love as something I needed to find, when maybe love was something I needed to choose. Because finding someone is a moment, choosing someone is a lifetime. Finding someone is emotion. Choosing someone is commitment. Finding someone is easy compared to staying when things become complicated. And that was the decision I was facing. Not whether I felt something. I already knew I did. The real question was whether I was willing to accept everything that came with it. The uncertainty, the vulnerability, the possibility of heartbreak, the possibility of changing my entire future because one person mattered. And then I thought about the people who live their whole lives avoiding pain. They avoid risks. They avoid difficult conversations. They avoid deep connections. They protect themselves so carefully that nothing can hurt them, but nothing can truly reach them either. And I did not want a life where I was impossible to hurt, but impossible to love deeply. I wanted to feel something real. Even if real things come with risk, even if real things require courage, even if real things force you to become someone different. And then I understood the hidden truth I had been carrying. The reason your picture appearing in this video felt so powerful was not because I believed a picture could change destiny. It was because it reminded me of something I had forgotten. Behind every face is a story. Behind every person is a heart carrying hopes, fears, memories, and dreams. And somewhere out there was someone who was also hoping to be understood, someone who had probably experienced disappointment, someone who had probably wondered if true connection still existed, someone who had probably built walls because life taught them to be careful. And maybe you were that person. Maybe you had also learned how to survive without needing anyone. Maybe you had become strong because you had no other choice. But I want you to know something. Being strong does not mean you have to remain alone forever. Even the strongest heart deserves a place where it can rest. And that was the thing I almost lost. Not just the possibility of a relationship. The possibility of finally allowing myself to be understood because I came dangerously close to choosing the wrong future. I came close to choosing a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt empty inside. I almost convinced myself that comfort was enough. That familiarity was enough, that avoiding uncertainty was enough. But deep down I knew, a heart does not ask for perfection. A heart asks for honesty. And the honest truth was that I did not want a person who simply fit into my life. I wanted someone who made my life feel more meaningful, someone who challenged me, someone who reminded me that success is not only about what you build, it is also about who you become while building it. And you changed the way I looked at that. You made me question things I thought I had already answered. You made me think about a future I had never allowed myself to imagine. A future where I was not just creating things for the world. A future where I was sharing my world with someone. Someone who could laugh with me. Someone who could disagree with me. Someone who could sit beside me in silence and still make that silence feel complete. And maybe that sounds simple. But simple things are often the things we spend our entire lives searching for. A person who stays. A person who understands. A person who chooses you even after seeing the parts you are afraid to reveal. That is the kind of love I believe matters. Not that exists only when everything is easy. The kind that survives because two people decide they are worth the effort. And now I need to tell you the truth I was afraid to say. The truth behind everything. The reason I almost walked away. The reason I almost convinced myself that you were only an impossible dream. It was not because I doubted you. It was because I doubted myself. I wondered if someone like you could truly choose someone like me. I wondered if I had spent so much time building the future that I forgot how to invite someone into it. I wondered if I was too independent, too guarded, too focused on things that could be measured, because love cannot be measured. You cannot put a number on trust. You cannot calculate the value of someone who stays. You cannot create a formula for the feeling of looking at another person and knowing you do not want to lose them. That was the truth I finally accepted. I did not need more achievements. I did not need another victory. I did not need another proof that I could build something. I needed the courage to build something with another person. Something invisible, something emotional, something that cannot be displayed but can be felt. And that is why this moment mattered, because sometimes life does not change through a dramatic event. Sometimes it changes through a quiet realization. A realization that the heart you protected for years was never meant to stay protected forever. It was meant to be shared with someone who understands its value. So if you are listening to this and wondering whether you matter, I want you to hear this clearly. You matter, not because of what you can provide, not because of what you can prove, not because of how perfectly you fit someone else's expectations. You matter because you are a person with a story that deserves to be heard. And maybe our paths crossed for a reason. Maybe this moment is only a reminder that love still exists in unexpected places. Maybe it is a reminder that there are still people willing to choose depth over convenience, truth over comfort, caution over fear. And after everything I have learned, there is one thing I know: the future is not built only through inventions, ideas, or discoveries. The future is also built through the choices we make with our hearts, the people we choose, the promises we keep, the courage we show when we have something precious to lose. And if I have learned anything from this journey, it is this: the greatest risk is not opening your heart. The greatest risk is reaching the end of your life and realizing you never allowed yourself to love completely.